Hello, and welcome to the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District's Introduction to VCAP and CAP for Landscape Professionals. This presentation is part one of a two-part webinar series for you, the landscape professional. It is meant to provide you with the information and the resources that you need to assist your clients in applying for one of our grant programs. We are very glad you're here and interested in the program. And we know that some of you will be new to the program and some of you have some experience with it. We look forward to improving and expanding this program with your input and your experience, and know that it will become a better benefit to our community, to your clients, and to your business with your participation. So thank you. We here at the district see VCAP and CAP as great ways to bring conservation-minded landscaping techniques to our community. We know that some of these are innovative and unfamiliar to landscape professionals, and so we really value your interest in taking them on and in pursuing this really important new method of managing our landscapes. The program has a real need for you all to be part of the solution, and so we like to be able to provide your names, your companies to people who are interested in the program. So we ask that you take these webinars and take our quiz. We ask that you take the quiz, retake it until you get all the answers right, submit that by May 15th, and we will put your company on our list, which goes to every interested applicant that we talk to about this program. This training is in two parts. It's online and self-paced for you. The first part is what you're looking at right now. I'll give you an introduction to both the CAP and VCAP programs. Part two is a separate video, and it is a more technical webinar. It will provide you with some really good soils information that will help you to create successful VCAP practices, and then it goes through some of the more popular VCAP practices in some detail. Both are also come with a study guide that goes over all of the material in the videos. You can find that on our website as well. It's a handy guide both for reference and for taking the quiz. Feel free to refer to that. In this presentation, we will cover the differences between VCAP and CAP. We'll talk about the eligibility for the programs, the application process, some resources that will help create a successful application, and then we'll go through some examples of VCAP and CAP projects that have been completed. So first, what are CAP and VCAP? They are technical and financial assistance programs to engage local property owners in water quality protection. VCAP is a statewide program. It's managed by the State Association of Soil and Water Conservation Districts and administered locally by each of the state's 47 districts. And in Fairfax County, the NVSWCD manages the program for Fairfax County property owners, as well as the City of Alexandria and the City of Fairfax. CAP is a county-only program funded by the County Board of Supervisors and available to county property owners. In most respects, the two programs follow the same format and the same guidelines and expectations. It's important to remember and to remind your clients that the participant will commit to maintaining the practice for 10 years, and they will be inspected periodically. We will come out, do inspections, make any recommendations for improvements, and basically just make sure that the facility is functioning as intended. CAP in one form or another has been available in the county since 2015. In that time, we have seen over 250 projects installed, and that equates to nearly $800,000 in cost share that we've distributed in Fairfax County, City of Alexandria, and Fairfax. We have also provided over 600 site visits, during which time we provide technical assistance to those property owners. The financial assistance provided through VCAP and CAP is meant to incentivize property owners to take additional measures in their landscape to provide water quality treatment. That is to actually filter out pollutants from the water that would otherwise run off from their property. So each of these practices listed here has a water quality component, and some also have a water quantity component where they actually store water and prevent quantity of water from leaving the property. So our most popular and most used practice is conservation landscaping. And as you can see by the table here, the cost share rate is 80% of the actual costs up to a maximum of $7,000. And most of the practices are cost shared by the estimated cost, but some are also by square footage. You can see that permeable pavement, impervious surface removal, and green roofs are actually cost shared according to the square footage of the practice. And rainwater harvesting, which is basically installing a cistern of 250 gallons or larger, is reimbursed by the number of gallons that are treated through that practice. I have used the terms VCAP and CAP somewhat interchangeably, and I just want to take a minute to explain the difference between what we call VCAP and the county CAP program. There aren't that many differences, and mostly your clients will not be aware of the differences or even which program they are in, but there are some key differences that you should be aware of. VCAP is the statewide program, and it is available to all property owners in the Commonwealth. We administer the program for Fairfax County, the City of Fairfax, and the City of Alexandria. And the completed applications that are submitted are reviewed both by our board and the State VCAP Steering Committee. The projects are ranked using criteria that address statewide water quality goals. For the county CAP, we have funds that Fairfax County has provided for the program, which supplements state funding. This has helped a great deal to ensure program stability, and if funding goes up or down at the state level, we are assured of having funds to supplement in those cases. The completed applications for the county CAP are reviewed and approved by our board, and they don't go to the state. And then we also do try to address more specific local objectives, for example, protecting resource protection areas around streams, converting turf areas to natural landscaping, and focusing on particular communities that are experiencing unusual duress of stormwater or stream restoration projects. But outwardly facing, the process is basically the same. Both programs follow the same application process. The only place where your client may see a difference is when they sign the landowner agreement. That form will identify the program which is actually funding the project. We ask that all interested participants fill out the site visit request form. It is a short and easy form, should only take a few minutes, basically contact information and a little bit of background about the issue being experienced by the property owner. This gives us enough information to do a little bit of initial research and initial evaluation of eligibility for the program. It also puts the participant in the queue for a site visit. So important to fill this out. It can be accessed through this link here, directly at forms.office.com, or through a link on our website. We also ask in filling this out that folks send us a couple photos of the proposed project area to our general district mailbox. Every application starts with a site visit. As a program requirement, NVSWCD staff must visit a site in person before a property owner can apply for a grant. The staff person will determine at that site visit whether the property has potential for a CAP practice and whether the owner is interested in applying for funding for that practice type. For example, a owner might be interested in a practice type such as permeable pavers, and staff may determine that the site would not be a successful candidate for permeable pavers. And staff will talk with the owner about that and potentially explore other options with the owner. Ultimately, our recommendations are written up in a site report, an example of what you see here, and we email that to the owner within a couple weeks of the site visit. If you are already working with the owner, you are welcome to attend the site visit as well at the request of the owner. If you are contacted by an owner after they have met with us, be sure and ask them to share the report with you, as it will give you some good guidance on what we observed and what we recommend. It's not the end all of the discussion, it's the beginning of the discussion, but it's a pretty good guidepost for what we think will work on that property. And we use the VCAP manual and the ranking spreadsheet that was developed by the State Steering Committee. Both of those can be found at on the State Association website shown here. The ranking spreadsheet details some specific priorities of the program, and so that can be useful sometimes in determining whether a project that you propose may be successful for funding. The first item to consider when considering whether a property will be eligible for a VCAP or CAP grant is to ask the question, will the proposed project improve water quality? And we have this table in the VCAP manual, which provides some guidance on determining whether there is a resource concern caused by stormwater and whether it is something that can be treated with a VCAP practice. So you can see here the three concerns that the kind of buckets that we use to describe this are erosion, vegetation cover, and excess runoff. And you will see that in the site reports, our evaluations of properties, that if we have identified one or more of those in our site evaluation. We also provide the applicant with this checklist. It is a compilation of all the different practice types allowable in VCAP and CAP. As you can see across the top of the graphic, there is a row of practice types abbreviated. And if you read down through the column for each practice type, you will see the components of the application that are required for that specific practice type. So we're trying to make it clear what needs to be in the application and which practices don't require some of these things. So for example, if your client wants to apply for a rain garden, that would be under RG, the third column over the practice types. And if you go down that column, you'll see that, for example, they do not need a Form 5 for a rain garden. And they do need, number 8, they need an infiltration test result. So hopefully this form will help clarify what needs to be in each application for each type of practice. The third part of the checklist is the practice design components, and this is, of course, where you as landscape professionals will be of great value to your clients as they put their application together. For every practice, we need to see a design drawing. It can be sketched, it can be hard-lined, it can be done with a computer or by hand, but it does need to show us where on the property the project is going to be installed. We need dimensions to show us how big it is and be able to calculate a square footage area for many of them. Most of them will also need a cross-section, especially any project that is going to be infiltrating water or accepting a flow of water. We need to see how that water is entering the practice and how it's exiting. The construction sequence and timing is very important to describe for us, especially for any project that takes longer than a couple of days or is more complex in the number of things that have to take place. So if you have land disturbance, we of course want to make sure that there isn't going to be any sediment runoff during construction, and that just becomes more likely the longer the installation time is. And also include any soil stabilization plans like seeding and straw after the construction is completed, if that's appropriate for the project. For any of the infiltrator practices, you'll need to include sizing computations And that is basically just determining how much water is going to come into the practice and making sure that it's sized to handle a 1-inch storm at minimum. And we're happy to help with those if that's something that's not familiar to you at this point. Every project will need to have a plant list and or materials list, depending on what it is. We need the cost estimate as detailed as possible, and also then provide your client a maintenance plan so they know what to do to keep the practice functioning well for 10 years. All right, on to some specific policies in Northern Virginia. This is kind of like that phone recording you hear that listen carefully because our options have recently changed. So number one, a lot of people have asked about this. We no longer have deadlines in our jurisdiction at this time. That means we can accept site visit requests and applications year-round. We hope to be able to continue that indefinitely, but it will be based on capacity and the quantity of interest we have in the program. Number two, county compliance cases, which means if there are required best management practices, stormwater facilities on a property, VCAP and CAP funds cannot be used to address issues with those facilities, but please feel free to reach out to us and discuss any specific situation you may be encountering, and we'll help sort it out. Number three, 2 grants are allowed per parcel. HOAs can apply for additional grants depending on the number of households in the HOA through the county CAP funding that we now have. NVSWCD cost share cap is set at the time of approval. So if a project costs less than projected than is in the application, the reimbursement amount will be recalculated based on the final cost. But we cannot allow any increases. So if the project cost goes up beyond the application estimate, the property owner will not be eligible for any additional amount of reimbursement beyond that original approved amount. And currently, most of the practice types are reimbursed at 80% of the cost up to their cost share caps. And number 5, permeable pavers must be replacing existing impervious surfaces. We cannot cost share a new installation of permeable pavers on currently pervious surface. In VCAP, depending on the scale and complexity of the practice, a licensed design professional may need to stamp or seal the design. In some cases, a property owner may feel that that is not necessary, and in those cases, they can submit a Form 5 in order to waive the requirement for a stamp of a licensed professional. In this chart, you can see where that's allowed. Small scale practices are defined here, and they are eligible to be waived at the district level. Anything that constitutes a medium scale project does need to go to the state steering committee to be approved, and large scale practices cannot be waived. You must have a design professional seal those drawings. And all level 2 designs in the BMP world are considered large-scale projects. Here we're going to go over a typical timeline for a project. There are quite a few variables in the timeline, but just wanted to give you all an idea of how the process works and the time to expect for the various steps. So it starts with the site visit form submission by the owner, and that triggers us to review the form and schedule a site visit. That can take 1 to 2 months to get that in place. At the time of site visit, as we mentioned, that is where it's determined whether they are eligible to proceed with an application, and they can start that application process right after the site visit. We find that a few people are ready to go with an application in just a week or so, but most people take a few months, whether it's to find a landscape professional to work with, or just to create the design, or to work with their own personal family timeline. So that's a big variable. We do see generally people take 3 to 6 months perhaps for an application submission. But if you're working with them, that's more under your control as well. So the approval timeline takes about a month or two from the time we actually receive a completed application. Things that can extend that are if the application is incomplete and it takes back and forth to get the information that we need before we submit it. Also, on our end, there are a couple months of the year that our committees don't meet. Generally, they meet every month except for August and December. That does vary sometimes, but you can expect that in those 2 months there might be an extra time lag on the approval. But once the approval is made, we send out an email to the owner, and that is the point where they sign their landowner agreement that they want to proceed in the program, and they can begin installation. Installation should begin within 90 days of that approval. There are some exceptions if you need to extend that because of planting season or other issues that are relevant to the potential success of the project. Those are accepted, but we need to know about them. Otherwise, we expect that a project will begin construction installation within 90 days of the approval email. And there is a deadline of 6 months from that date as well for completion. When the project is completed, the homeowner, the property owner, gets in touch with us to schedule an inspection. There is a reimbursement request form they need to fill out, and we need to have photos and any copies of invoices or receipts that they have that justify the reimbursement request. Then when we have those in hand, we schedule an inspection. That's generally a pretty quick turnaround on our end. And then the reimbursement request goes back to the committees and is approved. And then once it's approved, our office sends out a check by mail. Now we'll move on to some resources that are available to you as you work on VCAP projects. Most important is our design manual, and it is available on the State Association website. It's here shown the table of contents, gives you an idea of what it covers. It will give very specific details about each practice and also more general information about the program. A link to this is on our website. Earlier, I mentioned the infiltration test and that every practice that relies on infiltration requires an infiltration test. So if you look on the right side here, that is our infiltration test that we recommend. There are others, but this is the simplest and can be done by the property owner or by a landscape professional, and we at the district office can also help with this if need be. It's a fairly simple process. It goes through in detail step by step, and this form is available on our website. Also, it's really important to know what soil you're working with. This is done through first by looking at the great soils viewer that the county has on its website. Very simple to use. You go to that soils viewer, you type in an address, and it pops up with the soils that are identified, have been identified on that property. And if you click on it, it will give you the number that the soil is identified by, which you can and then look and see what its general characteristics are. The soil should also be looked at and analyzed on site, and a good time to do that is with the infiltration test. And we have a great soil scientist on staff, Dan Schwartz, who is ready and willing to help any and all VCAP and CAP applicants with this process. City of Fairfax and Alexandria's soils information is available through the USDA website. District staff has created these wonderful spreadsheets for your use. We have them for the 4 infiltration practices listed here. There are links on our website to access them, and they're very helpful for a quick calculation on the size and depth of your infiltration practice. We also need you to be aware that in some cases, coordination with Fairfax County will be required for these projects. Most projects are much smaller than anything that would trigger a rough grading plan or other site plan work, but it is good to keep in mind that the the limits of disturbance will need to include any area of construction access. So if you're working in a remote part of a property and need to drive over pervious surface, unpaved surface to get there, that is going to be included in that square footage calculation. So it can add up. Also, any work in RPAs is going to likely need coordination with the county. If you are removing plant material, taking down trees, or doing any clearing, that definitely needs to go through the county permit process. And the county does not want to see any rain gardens or infiltration practices in the RPAs. But we're happy to talk with you about those if you have a client who is interested in working in and or around an RPA. One requirement that we haven't addressed yet is that all VCAP and CAP projects must use Virginia native plants in any planting plan. We use the Virginia Plant Atlas, that's called the Digital Atlas of the Virginia Flora, to determine a plant's native status. And so if it's in that book, we think it's fine to plant in a VCAP or CAP project. We don't distinguish between cultivars, varieties, or straight species. We prefer straight species overall, but we do allow the cultivars and varieties in this program. Plant Nova Natives has a great guide, a wonderful website for direction on both plants and locations to find them. There are also very good resources locally. We're very lucky. We have some great native plant nurseries and some very knowledgeable nursery people who will help you. And the native plants at the bottom here, the Native Plants for Wildlife, Habitat and Conservation Landscaping, is a terrific publication by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Just one note on that, it does cover a wider area, so actually some of the plants listed there are not native to Virginia, and you need to make sure in the description it says native to Virginia. For more help, there are many other programs that are similar to VCAP and the VCAP practices, and you can use any of these to give you some more ideas. And some of the publications here have detailed planting plans with selected plants and a lot of good information. Just make sure that what you come up with ultimately aligns with the VCAP designs. And then there are some great opportunities for further training. The Chesapeake Bay Landscape Professional Program is a wonderful program that will introduce all of these concepts and run you through design and installation and maintenance of these small-scale BMPs. And they have ongoing education as well as their certification levels. Chesapeake Stormwater Network is another group that does great training and has a lot of resources of their own on their website. Okay, just a quick run through of some mistakes we've seen and we hope that you can avoid. So cost estimates are probably the number one bugaboo. We too often get cost estimates that are not itemized, and it's really important for a successful application to have an itemized cost estimate. Everything that goes into a project, you've put a price on, and as much detail as you can give us is really valuable for the review committees to understand what is generating the expenses in a project. The program does emphasize that the proposals should be cost-effective solutions to the stormwater issue on the property. Cost estimates also, if there are non-reimbursable costs, please make that clear or just don't include them in the VCAP application. There are some specific things like non-native plants that shouldn't be on there. Also, fees for completing the VCAP application are not an eligible expense. It should be noted that design fees are eligible. And also, if you do charge an upfront fee for designing a VCAP project, you can receive payment for that, and that is still a reimbursable expense. But the homeowner or property owner needs to understand that they may not get reimbursed for that until their application is approved. So they may be out that fee if their application does not get approved for some reason. Another mistake to avoid is not identifying an RPA. If there is a stream nearby a property, please check the county RPA maps and identify whether there is an RPA. In this map here, you can see the hatched lines are the RPA locations around streams that you will typically see on the county mapping. That's just something that will slow the application if that hasn't been done yet. We need to make sure that the proper forms have been filed with the county, and that can take a little bit of time. So go ahead and make sure that's done up front, so that's not something that will hold things up. Land disturbance around trees, really important to respect the drip line of the tree. We don't want to see disturbance around the critical root zones, and we know that in such cases, that you may be planting there. We want to see the smallest specimens used around tree roots, meaning plugs primarily, and light mulching, obviously no tilling. We also want to make sure that the instructions for installation include using small hand tools and not disturbing roots. Another mistake we see, not very often, but every once in a while, poor practice selection where the practice that was selected does not really fit the issue being addressed. Normally, if you're sticking to the recommendations that we've made in the site report, then that's not an issue. And then last, just important to remember to not begin construction work, do not begin installation until that official email has been received and your property owner has signed their landowner agreement. We need that in hand before the project starts. Okay, after approval is received, please start the installation within 90 days of that official email that says the project is approved. If there's a reason that it can't be started, please communicate with us. It's important that we have a sense of when these projects are being installed. Once installed, the applicant should contact us to set up the final inspection. We will need to see photos and final plant lists and invoices and a reimbursement request from them. Please document the installation to ensure that the projects are installed the way that the application describes. That way, that makes for a smooth reimbursement. During the final inspection, we will verify plants. So if you have plant labels, leave them on for us and also for your client. Often it's very helpful to guide them in their planted landscape after you're gone. We will verify that the installation is complete and that the areas around the project are stabilized. So any bare soil should be seeded, perhaps protected with straw or jute matting. We want to make sure that there isn't going to be sediment runoff during establishment of these practices. Once the reimbursement is approved, your client will receive their check by snail mail within a few weeks of the approval notification. The 10-year maintenance agreement starts the next January 1st. And 20% of the VCAP cap inventory is inspected each year. So you can expect a few inspections over that 10-year period. And don't forget, we are here to help. Now on to some samples of what these practices actually look like. We'll go through these kind of quickly, but just wanted to give you some visuals and hopefully some inspiration. First off, conservation landscaping is probably the most common practice we see. It does need to still address the resource concerns that we talked about earlier. So here you can see on the left that the ground is poorly covered. There's some erosion, evidence of erosion here, and clearly a lot of runoff from that parking lot above. And the solution was to plant a conservation landscape bed, here shown in the summertime as it's pretty well fully established. Again, similarly, an area that was clearly suffering from too much water, both with an excess runoff from the damage to the grass you can see there and the poor vegetative cover. And on the right, it was turned into a lovely conservation bed. Here is behind a property that backs up to some woods where there was a fair amount of runoff still coming from that woodland down a steep slope, and so you can see that some jute landscape fabric was used in order to help stabilize the soil during the installation. And then after installation. Here is a rain garden being constructed. Some rain gardens will have under drains. Most of ours tend not to, but that depends on the amount of water that is being captured and what the soil condition is. If you have less well infiltrating soils, you may need an under drain if you're going to install a rain garden. Here is that rain garden afterwards. Mostly you can see perennials, a few woodies. Here are infiltrations, trenches, and dry wells. So on the left you see a milk crate type infiltration trench. It could also just be gravel. These milk crate type construction techniques allow for more water capacity than a gravel bed, but both are allowed. In the middle you see the same idea with the dry well, where these barrels will hold more water than we can calculate for a gravel bed, and so they are space savers. And here is that infiltration trench after it was put in and then sodded over. Here's a permeable pavement installation, and we do look for the permeable pavement to treat water from a specific source. For example, here this downspout leads right onto the permeable pavement. It probably is a better practice to have that reach the permeable pavement further out from the foundation. We prefer to see those connections at 10 feet out from the property. Rainwater harvesting is a less common practice, but a great one. And rainwater harvesting is larger than your typical rain barrel. So here's a view of the rainwater cistern that was installed. It has to be at least 250 gallons to qualify for the program, whereas your typical rain barrel that you might get through us or through other programs for homeowners use is generally around 50 gallons. This is an application that came from a homeowners association, and here they provided photographs that show where the concerns are. Runoff down a hill causing erosion and poor vegetative cover. And here is part of their work afterwards. You can see the observation well beyond. In this photo, there's an infiltration trench there beyond the planting. And we have another photo of it here. The observation wells are very useful for inspections and to make sure the practice is functioning properly. So that concludes this webinar. Next, we'd like you to watch the technical webinar that's available on our website. And that includes some great soils information from Dan Schwartz, our soil scientist, and more in-depth detail about popular VCAP practices from Maria Harwood, our conservation specialist in the office. So please watch that and then take the quiz. Hopefully you've already completed part of it at this point. Make sure it's 100% correct and submit it to us by May 15th, and we will add you to our Landscape Pro list for the new program year. Thank you for being part of VCAP, and we look forward to working with you.